All right, let's start with some football, ladies. We are going to have Kai Stevens from Jaguars.com join us at 12:40. So I want to have this conversation ahead of that. Now that we're through free agency, obviously, and through the NFL draft, what are the top 3 position groups on the Jacksonville Jaguars? I think the first 2 are fairly easy to come up with, but I want to obviously see what y'all think.
Well, what do you believe? Let's start with that, Lauren.
Okay.
What do you think are the easiest 2?
So to me, it's edge and wide receiver. I think other teams in the NFL would love to have the combination of Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker on their team. And certainly the edge depth, maybe we'll see. But as far as starters, those 2 guys. And I think lots of NFL teams would love to have Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter on their teams.
Okay, and then what happens beyond those 2?
Yeah, so for me, that's really the interesting conversation comes up. I could go quarterback if Trevor Lawrence stays healthy.
Oh, no, I mean, let's stay in that wide receiver room, Lauren. What happens after those 2 in that wide receiver room on the depth chart?
For me, it's De'Ami Brown, a clear 3, and then Parker Washington 4, and then it shakes out from there. Maybe Gabe Davis. I don't know who really is wide receiver 5 at this point. I think we'll have to see a lot more football to shake out, but that's how I would
your
have
wide
it.
receiver 5 was wide receiver 2-3 last year is how you could look at it.
And also, can he really be your wide receiver 5? Because traditionally, that role is reserved for someone who contributes on special teams, and I don't see Gabe Davis contributing.
So Parker 5?
Right, but so then Gabe Davis is your 4, which, again, shows improvement in the room overall, but ultimately, for me, I think if you were an outsider looking at that room and you see De'Ami Brown and Gabe Davis as your 3-4, you would say, oh, yeah, that's a pretty good room. But I would argue, and maybe it was recency bias and prisoner of the moment and coming off of the 2022 season, when you looked at that wide receiver room and you saw he who must not be named Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, you looked at it with a different lens than looking at this room, which is extremely top-heavy, so long as Travis Hunter becomes who we all believe he will be. But then after that, realistically, and I think this is the same conversation you can have for the offensive and defensive line across the National Football League, you're not supposed to have 5 bona fide stars up and down the room, unless you're the Chicago Bears wide receiver room, because in that case, yes, you do. Point being, I think comparatively to the rest of the league, yes, I think it's a good wide receiver room, but I'm not sure it's one of the best rooms on this team.
Oh, okay. Well, so I'll finish my third one. And I had a struggle between quarterback, if Trevor Lawrence can stay healthy, and if Trevor Lawrence is protected. And obviously now he has weapons, and running back. Mm-hmm. I really like this running back room from Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby, and then the 2 new rookies. So I feel like with Bashal Tutin, there's that huge element of speed that I don't think this running back group had last year. And then, of course, LaKent Allen offering a lot in the passing game. I really like the running back room. Quarterback, I could argue there, but I'll go edge receiver and I'll go running back.
Okay, Taylor.
Yeah, so my initial, when I was going to, I have wide receiver in mind. I had wide receiver running back, though, were my 1 and 2, and then I went to edge.
Okay.
And the reason I still have wide receiver in that group is because kind of what you were saying in the world of if you go to any other teams, there's very few teams that you pretty much look at, okay, here's their 1 and 2, and those are really good wide receivers. The best wide receiver groups in the room, you're looking at those 1 and 2. And then when you get to 3, like I think of the Bengals. The Bengals' third wide receiver is Andre Lascivis. I don't even know who that is. Kendrick Pryor and Jermaine Burton. Like those are their next wide receivers
I would say
outside of Jamar and Tate.
Yakachonis is really isn't their number 3, but continue.
That on their depth chart right now, it's Jamar T and whoever Lascivis is, and then Kendrick Pryor, Jermaine Burton, and Charlie Jones are their next wide receivers. If you go to the Rams, that's another group.
Oh, no, it's not Lascivis. It's Yakachonis.
Okay.
That's his name. Yeah, okay. I know. It's a tough one. I
don't even know how to say that.
I only know it because a friend of the program, Marshall Kramsky, loves to say it.
Okay.
And so I feel like every time I watch one of his videos, shout out Marshall with WCPO in Cincinnati, I feel like I learn how to say it a little bit more.
Okay. I don't know how that word translates to that word. But then you go to the Rams, which is another group people are talking about because they have Devontae and Puka Nacua. And after that, it's Tutu Atwell and then a Jordan Whittington and a Xavier Smith. So to me, those are some of the best wide receiver groups you're looking at. And I think that the Jags easily battle those groups right now with Travis Hunter and Brian Thomas Jr. at the top. And then I do think that a De'Ami Brown, I wasn't huge on the signing if he had to be like your number 2. But if you're talking about him being a number 3 wide receiver, I think honestly that's a really good 3.
I mean, mean, they paid him $10 million.
Yeah.
So what they're saying is they like him.
As sour as you are on Gabe Davis from last year, Gabe Davis was a number 2 wide receiver in Buffalo a few years ago. So I do think that you have a wide receiver group that can challenge the majority of them in the NFL, and that's what you're looking at. And then you do have, now that you've been able to add what you have at the top, you do have guys that you can focus a little bit more on the special teams area where you were relying on them to be wide receiver. Parker Washington was your number 2 at the end of the year last year, and now he's sliding down to a 4 or 5 and a special teams guy. But so to me, wide receiver's still up there, and it's really hard for me not to put running back group in there because I do still think that, I think league-wide, most people would look at Travis Etienne as still a really good running back. And I know, again, there's moments where I think some people get critical, but I think there's too many. We've seen too much good out of Travis Etienne when you have run blockers and when you have an offensive scheme that actually knows how to use the run game and working. And you just go 2 years ago, and people were talking about Etienne possibly being one of the better backs in the league. And because of what happened last year overall offensively, it kind of got taken away. I really like Tank, and I think Tank's that guy that can kind of carry certain moments. And there was times last year where I was wondering why Tank wasn't on the field more in certain situational downs. And then now you add a guy like Bashal too, and you still need to see him obviously at this next level, but he could technically be your 3 right now. But in 4 weeks into the NFL, he could be your number 1.
Yeah, ball security will be something to watch for
all 3 of them.
Really, all 3 of those 4 for sure. Mia, so Taylor and I actually went 3 for 3, the exact same, which is shocking. I feel like we always have different opinions, and you probably didn't even consider Trevor Lawrence as far as that.
For a second, I like for once, and not like Trevor. I think if I'm just doing head to head, number 1 quarterback versus number 1 quarterback, I think Trevor's ahead of a lot of guys. I just don't know that Nick Mullins ups that to me enough to put that group.
Would
in
Mac
there.
Jones have upped it though?
No, he downs it.
He
downs it for me.
Had to throw that out there.
Yeah, who you got?
Yeah, no, my number 1 position room is one that has not been mentioned yet.
All right,
and
let's mix it up here.
That
on
is, if I am to make a decision based upon, again, our question for you is, what are the best possession groups? The 3 best position groups on the Jacksonville Jaguars right now. I believe the way that you quantify that is when training camp gets underway, which room will see the hardest cuts, the most competition. And for me, I believe that is the off-ball middle linebacker group. And that includes the Sam linebacker, off-ball linebacker. Will it be the 6th-round pick, Jalen McLeod? Will it be Yasir Abdullah? Should you put them in the edge room? I won't at this point. I put them into that big collective with Foye Oluokun, Devin Lloyd, Chad Muma, Jack Kaiser, Ventrell Miller. That's a lot of names that you're going to have to sort through, and probably some tough cuts here, there, unless, of course, you say, no, McLeod's going to be our 4th edge rusher behind Josh Hines-Allen, Trayvon Walker, Emmanuel Ogbah, which I don't see happening, especially based off the comments from the regime so far since he was drafted.
All right, so your number 1 is linebacker.
Yes, number 1 is linebacker. Shout out to Trent Baalke. You make something that was good, and you make it a strength. Just keep on drafting linebackers, and at some point in time, there's going to be too many names and too many bodies. It has to be the strongest room.
By the way, a quick nugget from Albert Breer, since you mentioned linebackers.
Yeah.
He said that the Jacksonville Jaguars would like to keep Devin Lloyd, but obviously the position of linebacker, when you talk about outside linebacker and inside linebacker, that's all the same when it comes to the 5th-year option and that guaranteed money.
Right.
So they did not want to pay him that price, but they do like him and want to keep him. So I found that interesting.
That's the same reason the Packers haven't picked up a couple 5th-year options so far. It's the same reason that Tyler Linderbaum's 5th-year option was not picked up in Baltimore. It's
because
just
the offensive line is not, there's not a different delineation.
Right.
So the tackle and center are going to be paid the same, and it's all fully guaranteed according to the new CBA. And you don't want to pay a center. No offense to the centers, even though their job's important, you don't want to pay them the same as.
And
no
offense to Devin Lloyd, but you don't want to pay a Sam linebacker $13 million when in reality, if he performs well this year, maybe you get a cheaper 2-year friendly team option where you give him a lot of money up front, and then he's looking at somewhere in the ballpark of 6 to 9 per year, and with only X amount of that counting against the cap. So for me, yes, linebacker is the strongest position group on your Jacksonville Jaguars. I do want to make an asterisk. Are we including specialists? Specialists aren't included?
I mean, you can because they are the strongest.
Oh, they're number 1. Because they're number 1. They're number 1 if that's the case. Undoubtedly, there's no question for me that they would be number 1, and then it would be the linebacker room. But for this argument, we can take the specialists out. I don't know. Text line designed by Lifetime Enclosures, YouTube chat. You guys tell us.
Do we include the specialists?
Chime in, 904-641-1010. Do we include the specialists in our discussion of the 3 strongest position groups on your Jacksonville Jaguars, or is that a slight
They don't take enough snaps
to the rest of the roster?
That's the problem. They don't take
Well,
enough.
a lot of your points are field goals. Then
Listen, you got 2 Pro Bowlers and one who's probably inching closer and closer by the day. So I would put Edge second, excuse me. And it's only because I'm going to do a 3A, 3B when it comes to wide receiver, running backs. I kind of put them in that same tier together because I agree. I think that the talent is in both the wide receiver and the running back room, but you're also banking on rookie production. The edge room for me is the most proven. You could make the argument of any position group on this roster right now because once again, low bar to clear. We just needed Arden Key here in the city of Jacksonville. And you are, if only based upon his last 5-6 years of performance.
Yeah, that's what you're getting.
You're getting that in Emmanuel Ogbah.
The 6-sack guy.
And you couple that with, hey, maybe if our defense coordinator can effectively scheme up one of these off-ball linebackers that I was just discussing, maybe now you get some production there. Perhaps. Oh, boy. Now we're getting really crazy with it on Cinco de Mayo. Devin Lloyd on 3rd down. You line him up on the edge. He becomes your potential de facto 4th edge rusher. Point is, 1 through 3, I think you'd be hard-pressed, much like the conversation we had about the wide receiver room and offensive line for that matter, where 1 through 5, or in the case of the wide receiver room, 1 through 3, maybe aren't necessarily Pro Bowl, All-Pro. Mm-hmm. And that's where I look at the edge room and I see 3 guys, 2 of whom are Pro Bowl caliber, and a 3rd who's a strong contributor to a playoff team. And that for me says that's depth and that's strength.
Yeah, to me, I would have never put linebackers in this ever. I think that a lot of bodies doesn't mean it's one of the strongest groups, and I think that when I was looking at this, like if you're talking league wide, if someone were to want to pick players off of your team, maybe Foye. Foye is probably the only linebacker in this group that other teams would be like, yeah, we'll take him right now in this moment. That could change by this year. That could very well change because Ventrell, we saw a lot from Ventrell last year.
He has to stay healthy though.
Devin Lloyd is not good in coverage. So I think unless you're one of the teams that only needed him to maybe be the run stopper, maybe go after the quarterback a little, they wouldn't be taking him. The young guys, obviously, you don't even really know where they're playing yet or where they're going to be identified. I'm not the biggest Chad Muma fan in general, and so I definitely wouldn't put him in that group. But I think that, to me, it has the opportunity to be by the end of the year, depending how some of these younger guys, if Ventrell continues to develop, and who knows if they put Devin Lloyd in a spot where he does start to flash a little more, then maybe that changes. But for me, I would have never said the linebacker room.
I wouldn't either, and I would never have said the offensive line either.
Me either.
And not that anyone
You guys
did,
know
but
I wouldn't have.
Yeah, if we had gone with the 3 worst position groups, and then I might have put, honestly, linebacker in there because like you said, behind Foye, I'm just not convinced that any of these guys are going to be talented enough to be able to make the offensive coordinator have to strategize against them.
So let me pose it this way. Again, I have 3A, 3B in my position group rankings. I have wide receiver and running back. And the reason I have both of them in the 3rd tier and why there's a question mark and why there's a tie is because you're banking on 2 rookies coming in and contributing for you in that running back room. In the case of the wide receiver room, the hope is that Travis Hunter is plug and play. The hope is that he immediately emerges as a number 2 wide receiver, but that's still banking on potential. When it comes to the linebacker room, well, yes, the play has not necessarily been as quality as you would like. It's a chicken or the egg question. Is that the talent of the players, which Chad Muma was drafted around the same neck of the woods in that 3rd round that once upon a time Logan Wilson was by the aforementioned Cincinnati Bengals. He drew comps to him. Pretty good player out in Cincinnati. Devin Lloyd was a 1st-round pick. Multiple teams had 1st-round grades on him. I understand he fell to 25, but ultimately he would have been selected at some point in time. And so that's where it's a chicken or the egg question of, is there actually talent and experience pelts on the wall in that room comparatively to the others? And in turn, is coaching really what has been holding them back?
And I'd say that on the other side, too. I'd argue that the running back room isn't counting on the rookie running backs to do anything, because I would argue that Travis Etienne and Tank are really good backs and that they were in a bad coaching experience last year behind a bad offensive run blocking line. So to me, the wide receiver room, you're counting on Travis Hunter being a solid number 2 wide receiver, but you're not asking Travis Hunter to even be your number 1 wide receiver.
Right. And to me, I'm confident that a rookie can have a lot of production because we saw
BTJ.
what Brian Thomas Jr. did last season. And he's not the only example, obviously, league-wide as far as rookie receivers immediately contributing.
But is Brian Thomas Jr. the outlier?
What do you mean?
Puka Nacua would
Point
tell
being,
you.
No, we think we saw a lot of wide receiver, all the rookie wide receivers last year as well.
But again, is that group the outlier? Can we just expect immediately people are going to come, wide receivers are going to come into the league and they have that capability? I'm devil's advocate
I think if you're trading up to the number 2 spot for one, then you are expecting that.
I also think with the way that high school football, college football is now with the spread and 7-on-7s in the offseason, like these guys, these receivers are much, much, much in a better position than they ever have been to be able to come in. They are much readier. They are much more prepared and ready to come in and step right into the NFL season.
I bring the counter argument up just to say maybe we also need to, and this is kind of reflecting upon it, we need to appreciate what Brian Thomas Jr. did more in the grand landscape of NFL rookie wide receivers in the last 10 to 20 years. That's what I think. That's the point I'm getting at, is we need to appreciate that not everyone comes in and does that with a 9-game performing Trevor Lawrence and Mac Jones under center for the bulk of the season.
And Liam Cohen's may be looking at this, and we'll continue the conversation on the other side, but Liam Cohen may be looking at it completely differently than we are. It may be Brian Thomas Jr., De'Ami Brown, Parker Washington, and Gabe Davis. They're expecting more out of them for this season, and they're going to bring Travis Hunter along. I'm not saying he's not going to be on the field, but they're not going to necessarily target him the second most amount of times this season because he is a rookie, and they do know they have experienced vets around him.
Hey, Mia here, and thanks so much for watching 1010XL Jaguars. For even more coverage of the Big Cats, be sure to subscribe to 1010XL Jaguars.